Captain Kang Dae-ho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars through the massive viewport. His hands rested on the command console as he reviewed the latest reports from Earth. The meeting with the Galactic Council was scheduled to begin in 2 hours, and something felt wrong. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Park," Lieutenant Kim So-ra announced from her station. "Put it through," Dae-ho replied. Turning toward the main screen, Admiral Park Jin-suk appeared, his weathered face showing concern. "Captain, I need you to stay alert during today's session. Our intelligence suggests the Council has been meeting in secret for weeks. They're planning something big." Dae-ho nodded. "Any idea what it might be about?" "The pacification protocols. They want us to surrender all our military assets to Council control. Every ship, every weapon, every defense system." Park's voice was grim. "They say it's for galactic peace, but we both know what it really means." The transmission ended, leaving Dae-ho staring at the empty screen. The pacification protocols had been discussed for months. 12 alien species wanted humanity to give up their right to defend themselves. They claimed it would prevent future wars, but Dae-ho knew better. It would make humanity helpless. 2 hours later, the council chambers filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Dae-ho took his seat beside Ambassador Lee Min-ho, Earth's chief diplomat. Around them sat beings from 12 different worlds, each more advanced than humanity in their own way. The Zenthari Empire's representative, Ambassador Veltar, stood at the central podium. His tall, blue-skinned form commanded attention as he began to speak. "Today we address a critical issue facing our galaxy. The human species continues to resist the pacification protocols." Murmurs filled the chamber. Dae-ho noticed how the other species avoided looking at the human delegation. "For the safety of all civilized beings," Veltar continued, "we must ensure that no species maintains the capacity for large-scale warfare. Every member of this council has surrendered their military independence. Only humanity refuses." Ambassador Lee Min-ho stood up. "We refuse because we've seen what happens to species without the means to protect themselves. The Toran colonies fell to raiders because they had no defenses. The Crystal Collective lost 3 worlds because they trusted others to protect them." "Those incidents were unfortunate," replied Veltar, "but they occurred because not all species had joined our peaceful alliance. Once the protocols are universal, such tragedies will be impossible." "And if you're wrong?" Lee asked. "What happens to humanity if we surrender our defenses and someone decides we're no longer welcome in your alliance?" The chamber fell silent. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Councillor Zethkar of the Silicon Hegemony rose from his seat. His metallic form gleamed under the chamber lights. "Your species is young and aggressive. You have been part of galactic society for only 50 years, yet you've been involved in more conflicts than species with centuries of membership." "We've helped stop those conflicts," Dae-ho interjected.
"Human peacekeepers ended the trade war between the Kovani and the Myrtal."
"Human mediation resolved the border dispute in the Outer Rim. By using force," Zethkar replied coldly. "Always by using force." Dr. Kang Mina, Dae-ho's sister, spoke from the Scientific Observer section. "We use force only when peaceful solutions fail. Our record shows we try diplomacy first in every situation." "Your record shows you cannot be trusted with military power," Veltar said firmly. "The vote has already been taken. 12 species have agreed. Humanity will comply with the pacification protocols or face the consequences." Ambassador Lee stepped forward. "What consequences? Are you threatening us?" "We are offering you a choice," Veltar replied. "Surrender your military capabilities and remain a valued member of galactic society. Refuse, and face complete isolation until your species learns the value of peace." Dae-ho felt his blood run cold. Complete isolation meant cutting off all contact with the galaxy. "No trade, no communication, no support of any kind." "You can't be serious," Lee said. "Isolation would condemn humanity to a slow death. Our colonies depend on galactic trade networks. Our research facilities need shared technology exchanges. Then comply with the protocols," Councillor Nixara of the Crystal Collective added. Her crystalline form chimed softly as she spoke. "Join the rest of us in civilized peace." President Park Jin-woo's image appeared on the communication screen from Earth. His face was pale but determined. "The United Earth government rejects the pacification protocols. Humanity will not surrender its right to self-defense." The chamber erupted in angry voices from the alien delegates. Veltar raised his hand for silence. Then the decision is made, he announced. By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby placed under complete quarantine. All trade agreements are terminated. All diplomatic relations are severed. All communication channels are closed. This is insane, Lee protested. You're condemning an entire species because we won't make ourselves defenseless. We are protecting the galaxy from a species that refuses to evolve beyond violence, Veltar replied. The isolation barriers will activate in 1 hour. Any human vessels outside your territorial boundaries will be escorted back. Any attempt to breach the barriers will be considered an act of war. Deho stood up slowly. And if we prove you wrong? If humanity survives and thrives despite your isolation? Veltar's expression remained unchanged. Your species will remain quarantined until you demonstrate that you have evolved beyond your primitive nature, or until your civilization collapses under the weight of its own violence. The council session ended with the sound of gavel striking podium. As the alien delegates filed out, none looked back at the human representatives. They had made their choice, and in their minds they had chosen correctly. Back on the UES Defiance, Deho watched as massive energy barriers began forming around human space. The isolation was beginning. Every human colony, every research station, every ship would be trapped within these barriers. Captain, Lieutenant Kim reported, we're receiving similar reports from all our colonies. The barriers are going up everywhere. On New Eden Colony, Dr. Kang Mi-na watched supply ships that had been approaching her research station suddenly turn away. 300 colonists looked to her for answers she didn't have. President Park Jin-woo stood in the Oval Office, staring at the final message from the Galactic Council. The text was brief and final. Your species has chosen the path of violence over peace. You will remain quarantined until you evolve beyond your primitive nature, or until you perish in your own isolation. Across human space, the reality set in. Humanity was alone. The galaxy had turned its back on them, convinced that isolation would either change them or destroy them. But as Deho looked out at the barrier surrounding his ship, he felt something the aliens hadn't expected. Not despair or fear, but determination. They wanted to see what humanity would become in isolation. They were about to find out. The galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. 3 years had passed since the galaxy abandoned humanity. Commander Lee So-young stood at her post on Defense Platform 7, watching the endless darkness beyond the isolation barriers. The platform floated in the outer edges of human space, one of dozens built to monitor the energy walls that kept humanity trapped. Commander, we have movement, Sergeant Park Min-soo called from his sensor station. Something is approaching the barrier from grid section 12. So-young moved to the main console. On the screen, a small object drifted toward the shimmering energy wall. It was clearly artificial, roughly the size of a shuttle, but with design patterns she had never seen before. It's a probe, she said, studying the readings. Alien construction. Someone is testing our barriers. Orders, Commander? Park asked. So-young watched the probe move closer to the barrier. For 3 years, humanity had been cut off from all outside contact. No ships had come or gone. No messages had been received. The galaxy had maintained perfect silence. Until now, track it, she ordered. Record everything. If they want to see how we react, let's give them something to think about. The probe touched the barrier and immediately began scanning. Bright beams of energy swept across the energy wall, taking measurements and recordings. So-young felt anger building inside her, but also something else. Determination. They think we're dying in here, she said quietly. They think we're getting weaker. Are we? Park asked. So-young smiled grimly. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the Watchers have finally shown themselves. 2,000 kilometers away, in the asteroid mining fields of the Ceres Belt, engineer Kim Tae-sung was having the best day of his career. The isolation had forced humanity to become completely self-sufficient, and that meant mining every resource they could find. The yield is incredible, he told his team over the comm system. This asteroid has more rare metals than we've seen in months. His assistant tech specialist Yoon Hae-young looked up from her scanner readings. The isolation barriers are actually helping us. Look at these energy readings. Tae-sung moved to her station and studied the data. The barriers that trapped humanity also protected them from outside interference. No one could see what they were building. No one could monitor their progress. No one could steal their innovations. We're working in complete secrecy, he realized. The galaxy has no idea what we're doing out here. Should they? He Young asked. Tae-sung thought about that question. For 3 years, humanity had been adapting to isolation. They had learned to grow their own food, build their own ships, and solve their own problems. They had become stronger, not weaker. Maybe not, he said finally. Maybe it's better this way. In the underground laboratories of Mars, Dr. Yoo Hye-jin was making discoveries that would have shocked the galaxy. She stood before a table covered with alien technology, pieces salvaged from old diplomatic gifts and trade agreements from before the isolation. The galaxy's species have become too specialized, she explained to her research team. The Xanthari focus only on energy weapons. The Silicon hegemony only works with computer systems. The Crystal Collective only understands mineral processing. Dr. Bai Sun Ki, her lead researcher, nodded. They depend on each other for everything else. But humans are different, Hee-jin finished. We're generalists. We can learn anything, adapt to anything, build anything. That's what made them afraid of us. She picked up a piece of Xanthari energy technology and held it next to a human-built component. They thought specialization made them superior. But specialization also made them vulnerable. They can't survive without each other. But we can, Sun-ki said. We already are, Ye-jin replied. On Earth, Admiral Cho Byung-ho walked through the massive construction facility, hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains. The project taking shape before him would have been impossible 3 years ago. It required resources, technology, and coordination on a scale humanity had never attempted. Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule, reported Director Nam Ji-won. The first phase ships will be ready for testing in 6 months. Byung-ho studied the massive vessels taking shape in the construction bays. They looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Human engineering combined with captured alien technology, but improved and enhanced beyond the original designs. These ships aren't just for defense, he said. No, sir, Ji-won agreed. When the barriers come down, we won't be asking for permission to rejoin galactic society. We'll be announcing our return. And if they don't want us back, Ji-won smiled coldly, then they'll learn why they isolated us in the first place. Far out on the New Eden colony, Dr. Kang Mi-na stood in the central plaza watching children play. 300 colonists had been trapped here when the barriers went up. Everyone had expected them to struggle, maybe even fail. Instead, the colony was thriving. The hydroponics farms are producing twice what we projected, Colony Administrator Park Sung-min reported. The atmospheric processors are running at 120% efficiency. Our population is actually growing. Mina nodded. Isolation forced us to become self-reliant. We stopped depending on galactic supply ships and started building everything ourselves. The children born here don't even know there's a galaxy out there, Sung-min said, watching the young ones play. Maybe that's for the best, Mina replied. They're growing up human, not as junior members of some galactic community. They're proud of what we've built here. What happens when the barriers come down? Mina looked up at the energy wall that surrounded their world. We'll show the galaxy what humanity became while they weren't watching. Back on Defense Platform 7, Commander Lee So-young received a priority message from Earth. The orders were simple but shocking. All defense platforms were to begin Phase 2 of the hidden construction project. The massive structures floating in space would soon reveal their true purpose. Sergeant Park, she called. Initiate Phase 2 protocols. Yes, Commander. Should I ask what we're building? So-young looked out at the probe still scanning their barriers. Somewhere beyond that energy wall, alien species were probably discussing humanity's fate. They were deciding whether the isolation had worked, whether humans had learned their lesson. We're building the future, she said. A future where humanity doesn't need permission from anyone. The probe finished its scans and moved away from the barrier. Its mission was complete. It had gathered data about humanity's prison and would report back to its masters. What it couldn't detect was the revolution happening behind those walls. Humanity wasn't dying in isolation. They weren't becoming weaker or more desperate. They were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. The barriers meant to contain them had become the cocoon for their transformation. And when they finally emerged, the galaxy would discover that humanity had used their 3 years of isolation to evolve far beyond what anyone thought possible. The awakening had begun. 5 years after the Great Abandonment, Captain Nam Jun-soo guided his stealth reconnaissance ship through the outer edges of human space. His mission was simple but dangerous: gather intelligence on what lay beyond the isolation barriers without being detected. The readings on his instruments made no sense. According to every projection the galaxy had made, human settlements should be failing by now. Resources should be running low. Population should be declining. Technology should be stagnating. Instead, his sensors showed the opposite. "This can't be right," muttered his navigator, Lieutenant Shin Mi-kyung. "The colony on Kepler 7 shows a population increase of 40%. Junsu checked his own readings. The mining stations in the Vega system are producing 3 times their original output. How is that possible? Maybe our instruments are damaged, Mi-kyung suggested. Run a full diagnostic, Junsu ordered. But he already knew the instruments were working perfectly. The impossible truth was that humanity wasn't just surviving in isolation. They were thriving. "Sir," Communications Officer Lee Dong-wook called from his station, "I'm picking up massive quantum communication bursts between all human settlements." "That's impossible," Junsu said. "We don't have the technology for galaxy-wide quantum communication." "We do now," Dong-wook replied, his voice filled with amazement. "Every human colony, every ship, every research station is connected. It's like we've become one giant network." Junsu stared at the readings. The galaxy had cut off all human communication, forcing each settlement to survive alone. Instead, humanity had built something better than they ever had before. They had unified completely. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, Lieutenant Colonel Bae Sun-hee walked through the massive complex that housed humanity's greatest achievement. The network, as it had come to be called, was more than just a communication system. It was the nervous system of a new kind of civilization. "Status report," she requested from the lead technician, Dr. Kim Jae-won. "All nodes are operating at maximum efficiency," Jae-won replied. "Response time between Earth and the farthest colony is less than 1 second. Every human in the galaxy is connected," Sun-hee nodded. The isolation barriers had forced humanity to create new solutions. Without access to the galaxy's communication networks, they had been forced to build their own. The result was technology that made the galaxy's systems look primitive. "The coordination level is unprecedented," Jae-won continued. "When the colony on Proxima 3 needed medical supplies, 17 other colonies responded within minutes. When the mining operation at Ross 128 discovered new techniques, every human facility had the information within an hour." "We're not separate colonies anymore," Sun-hee realized. "We're one civilization with many locations." "Exactly. The galaxy wanted to isolate us, but they accidentally forced us to unify completely." In the research laboratories of Europa Station, Dr. Song Ye-jin stood before her greatest creation. The fusion of human innovation with captured alien technology had produced results beyond her wildest dreams. "The test results are confirmed," she announced to her team. "Our new hull material is 40% stronger than anything the Zenthari produce. It actually grows stronger when attacked." Research assistant Park Chan-woo looked up from his console. "The energy systems are even more impressive. They adapt to any power source and convert it to whatever we need." Ye-jin moved to another workstation where weapons prototypes waited for testing. "The defense systems learn from every attack pattern and develop countermeasures automatically. It's like our technology is alive," observed Dr. Lim Sora from the computer science section. "In a way it is," Ye-jin agreed. "We took the galaxy's specialized knowledge and combined it all into adaptive systems. They think in rigid patterns. We think in flexible solutions." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just matched galactic technology. They had surpassed it by combining everything they had learned into something completely new. Admiral Kang Dae-ho stood on the bridge of humanity's first completed Titan-class vessel. The UES Phoenix was unlike anything that had ever existed. 5 years of human innovation, driven by the desperate need to not just survive but to ensure their species would never be vulnerable again. "Final systems check complete," reported Chief Engineer Won Hai-sun. "All departments report ready." Dae-ho looked out at the construction yards where dozens of similar vessels were taking shape. The galaxy thought they had trapped humanity in a cage. Instead, they had given them the time and motivation to build something unprecedented. "These ships aren't just weapons," he said to his first officer, Commander Yu Sang-ho. "They're statements." "What kind of statements, Admiral?" "That humanity doesn't ask for permission anymore." The bridge crew worked with the kind of efficiency that had become standard throughout human space. 5 years of isolation had taught them that they could only depend on each other. The result was a level of cooperation and coordination that amazed even them. On New Eden Colony, Dr. Kang Mina watched the latest transport arrive from Earth. But this wasn't a supply ship bringing necessities. It was a construction vessel bringing advanced manufacturing equipment. "We're not just maintaining the colony anymore," Colony Chief Park Sungmin observed. "We're expanding it," Mina nodded. "Every human settlement is growing. We're not just surviving in isolation. We're using it as an opportunity to become something new." Children played in the colony's parks, completely unaware that there was a galaxy beyond their world. To them, humanity was all that mattered. They were growing up with a sense of human pride and capability that no previous generation had possessed. "What happens when the barriers come down?" Sungmin asked. Mina watched the children play. They were strong, confident, and completely unified in their human identity. "We'll show the galaxy what we became while they weren't watching. And if they don't like what they see, then they'll learn why they were afraid of us in the first place." Back in Earth's command center, President Park Jin-woo received the daily reports from across human space. Every colony was thriving. Every research facility was making breakthroughs. Every ship was performing beyond specifications. "The transformation is complete," announced Defense Minister Choi Ye-young. "We're no longer the species that entered isolation 5 years ago." "What are we now?" Jin-woo asked. "We're what the galaxy made us," Choi replied. "They wanted to isolate us until we changed. They wanted us to abandon our aggressive nature and become peaceful like them. Instead, we became something they never imagined. We're still human, but we're unified, advanced, and completely self-sufficient. We don't need them anymore." Jin-woo looked out at the stars hidden behind the energy barriers. Somewhere out there, 12 alien species continued their lives, probably assuming that humanity was slowly fading away. They had no idea that humanity had spent 5 years in the greatest period of growth and advancement in their history. The isolation meant to weaken them had instead forced them to become stronger than they had ever dreamed possible. The silent revolution was complete. Now it was time to reveal what they had become. 7 years after the Great Abandonment, Commander Ryu Sang-min piloted the stealth ship UES Shadow through space beyond human territory for the first time. His mission was dangerous but necessary. Break through the isolation barrier and see what the galaxy had become without humanity. The stealth technology that made this mission possible had been developed entirely during isolation. Human engineers had studied the barrier technology and found ways to slip through undetected. The galaxy had built walls to keep humanity in, but they had never considered that humanity might find ways to look out. "Barrier breach successful," reported his pilot, Lieutenant Park Ji-hoon. "We're now in neutral space." Sang-min studied his sensors as they moved deeper into galactic territory. What he saw made his blood run cold. "There are ships fighting in the Tau Ceti system," he announced to his crew. Navigation Officer Kim Yoo-jin checked her readings. "Multiple vessels engaged in combat. I'm detecting Zenthari Empire signatures and Crystal Collective markers." "They're at war?" Sang-min couldn't believe it. "The Zenthari and Crystal Collective were allies when we were isolated." "Not anymore," communications specialist Lee Jun-ho reported. "I'm intercepting battle communications. This isn't a small conflict. These are full battle fleets." Sang-min ordered a course change toward the combat zone. As they approached, the scope of the fighting became clear. Dozens of ships from both sides were locked in brutal combat. Explosions lit up space as vessels were destroyed. "How long has this been going on?" he wondered aloud. "Based on the debris patterns, at least 6 months, Yoo-jin estimated. Maybe longer." The crew watched in silence as the galaxy's supposedly peaceful species tore each other apart. The very peace that humanity's isolation was meant to preserve was crumbling. "Set course for the next system," Sang-min ordered. "We need to see how widespread this is." What they found was worse. System after system showed signs of conflict. The Silicon hegemony had attacked Kavani trade routes. The Myrtal Confederation was fighting border wars with the Tauri Republic. Everywhere they looked, the galaxy was falling apart. On Europa Station, Dr. Han Soo-jin worked through another night analyzing intercepted galactic communications. Her hidden listening posts, scattered throughout the outer regions of human space, had been gathering intelligence for months. "The pattern is clear," she reported to Earth Command via the quantum network. Without human peacekeeping forces, old conflicts have reignited across the galaxy. Her assistant, research analyst Choi Min-jun, pulled up star charts showing conflict zones. 27 separate wars in the past year alone. The galaxy hasn't seen this much fighting in centuries. Su-jin studied the communication intercepts. Hidden within the military reports and diplomatic messages were other signals. Secret transmissions between species that had been allies of humanity before the isolation. Some of them are starting to question the Council's decision, she noted. Listen to this transmission from a Kavani trade minister. She played the recording. The alien's translated voice was filled with regret. Our economy has collapsed without human innovation. Our trade routes are under constant attack without human protection. Perhaps the isolation was a mistake. They're starting to remember what we brought to the galaxy, Min-jun observed. Too little, too late, Su-jin replied coldly. They made their choice 7 years ago. In the political halls of New Geneva on Earth, Counselor Lee Yoon-soo led the newly formed Human Diplomatic Corps through their first major strategy session. The organization had been created not to beg for readmission to galactic society, but to prepare for negotiations from a position of strength. Our intelligence confirms that the galaxy is in chaos, she announced to the assembled diplomats. Multiple wars, economic collapse in several sectors, and growing dissent against the Council's leadership. Senior diplomat Nam Hye-won raised her hand. Are we considering offering assistance? Absolutely not, Yoon-soo replied firmly. They isolated us to teach us humility. Instead, they taught us that we don't need them. Now they'll learn that they need us. The room filled with murmurs of agreement. The diplomats were all veterans of galactic politics from before the isolation. They remembered how humanity had been treated as junior partners, constantly having to prove their worth. Our role is to prepare for eventual contact, Yoon-soo continued. When that time comes, we will negotiate as equals, not as supplicants begging for readmission. Diplomat Park Sun-ki stood up. What if they refuse our terms? Yoon-soo smiled coldly. Then they'll discover why they were afraid of us in the first place. The first crack in the Galactic Alliance appeared when a secret transmission reached Earth's communication arrays. The message came through old diplomatic channels that should have been completely severed. President Park Jin-woo read the transmission in his private office. It was from Trade Federation leader Keksani of the Kavani, one of the few species that had always maintained good relations with humanity. To the leaders of humanity, the message began. Our confederation faces complete economic collapse. Our trade networks have failed without human coordination. Our colonies are under attack without human protection. We were wrong to support your isolation. Please consider opening communication channels. We need your help. Jin-woo called an emergency meeting with his senior advisors. Defense Minister Choi Ye-young, Foreign Minister Lim Jae-sung, and Admiral Cho Byung-ho gathered in the Situation Room. They want us back, Jin-woo announced, sharing the Kavani message. 1 species out of 12, Cho pointed out. What about the others? Our intelligence suggests several others are having similar doubts, Lim replied. But they're afraid to break ranks with the Council. What do we do? Choi asked. Jin-woo looked out the window at the Earth's rebuilt cities. 7 years of isolation had transformed not just humanity's technology, but their confidence. They no longer saw themselves as the junior members of galactic society. We send a reply, he decided. What kind of reply? Lim asked. Jin-woo turned back to his advisors. We tell them they abandoned us when we needed them most. Now they'll wait until we're ready for them. The reply to the Kavani was brief and direct. You chose isolation for humanity. Now you must accept the consequences of that choice. When we return to galactic society, it will be on our terms and our timeline, not yours. The message sent shockwaves through the Kavani Trade Federation and beyond. Somehow word of humanity's response spread throughout the galaxy. The species that had been trapped and supposedly dying in isolation had just rejected a plea for help from one of the galaxy's major powers. More disturbing was the confidence in humanity's message. They didn't sound like a species desperately clinging to survival. They sounded like a species that had grown beyond the need for galactic approval. On Defense Platform 7, Commander Lee So-young detected increased probe activity near the isolation barriers. Multiple species were now sending reconnaissance devices to study humanity's prison. They're worried, she reported to Earth Command. For 7 years, they assumed we were slowly dying. Now they're starting to wonder what's really happening behind these barriers. Let them wonder, came the reply from Admiral Cho. Soon enough, they'll find out. The galaxy was beginning to crack. Wars raged where peace had once reigned. Economic systems collapsed without human innovation. And for the first time since the isolation began, some species were publicly questioning whether abandoning humanity had been a mistake. But the damage was done. Humanity had spent 7 years learning that they didn't need the galaxy's approval or support. They had built something better in isolation. The first crack had appeared in the Galactic Alliance. Soon it would become a flood. 10 years after the Great Abandonment, the isolation barriers around human space began to fade. Fleet Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the UES Ascension, watching as humanity's new fleet moved through the dissolving energy walls for the first time in a decade. Behind him stretched an armada that should not have existed. 50 Titan-class vessels, each one incorporating technology decades ahead of anything the galaxy possessed. The ships moved with perfect coordination, their crews working as one mind connected by the quantum network. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced Captain Song Min-jung from the communication station. Signal status to the fleet, Hyun-woo ordered. Today we return to the galaxy, not as the species that left, but as what we became in their absence. The first destination was Epsilon Crossing, the neutral station where galactic diplomacy had always taken place, the same location where humanity had been sentenced to isolation 10 years ago. Incoming transmission from the station, reported Communications Officer Kim Dae-young. They're requesting identification and purpose. Tell them, Hyun-woo said calmly, that humanity has returned for the reckoning. At Epsilon Crossing, Ambassador Veltar of the Zinthari Empire waited in the main conference hall with representatives from all 12 council species. They had come expecting to negotiate with a weakened humanity, ready to accept any terms for readmission to galactic society. What they saw through the station's viewports changed everything. The human fleet that approached was like nothing in the galaxy's databases. The ships were massive, elegant, and moved with impossible precision. Their hulls seemed to shift and adapt as they flew, technology that was clearly far beyond current galactic standards. This cannot be the same species we isolated, whispered Counselor Zethkar of the Silicon Hegemony, his metallic form reflecting the lights of the human vessels. How many ships are there? Asked Counselor Nixara of the Crystal Collective. 50 confirmed, replied the station's sensor operator. But Admiral, their energy signatures are off the charts. Each one of those vessels outguns our best dreadnoughts. Veltar felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. The species they had locked away as too primitive and violent had returned, with technology that made the galaxy's finest achievements look like children's toys. Open communication channels, he ordered. The main screen activated, showing the bridge of the lead human vessel. A woman in a crisp military uniform looked back at them with eyes that held no trace of the desperation they expected to see. I am Director OG1 of the Human Diplomatic Authority, she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, and carried the absolute confidence of someone who held all the advantages. We have come to discuss the terms of humanity's return to galactic society. Veltar stepped forward. Welcome back to— We are not here to be welcomed, G1 interrupted. We are here to present our requirements for rejoining galactic civilization. The alien delegates looked at each other in shock. They had expected humanity to beg for readmission. Instead, they were being presented with demands. What requirements? Veltar asked carefully. G1's image was replaced by a list of terms that appeared on every screen in the conference hall. The demands were shocking in their scope and audacity. Complete autonomy for all human-controlled space. Equal representation on the Galactic Council. Reparations for the economic and technological losses suffered during isolation. Most disturbing of all, the establishment of humanity as the galaxy's primary peacekeeping force. These terms are impossible, Counselor Zethkar protested. You cannot simply return and demand to lead the galaxy, can't we? G1's voice remained perfectly calm. Let me show you what humanity accomplished while you thought we were dying in isolation. The screens filled with images from human space. Thriving colonies that had grown beyond their original size. Massive industrial complexes producing technology the galaxy had never seen. Research facilities making breakthrough discoveries in every field of science. This is what 10 years of self-reliance achieved, G1 continued. While you fought wars and watched your economies collapse, we built a civilization that no longer needs your approval or support. Captain Shin Bo-ram received the order to begin the demonstration from her position aboard the UES Defiant. Her ship had been selected to show the galaxy exactly what human technology could accomplish. All stations, prepare for combat demonstration, she announced to her crew. Against what target, Captain? Asked her weapons officer, Lieutenant Choi Sung-ho. Against their entire defense fleet, Bo-ram replied calmly. The demonstration began as 3 major galactic powers sent their finest vessels to test humanity's capabilities. The Zenthari dispatched their newest battlecruiser. The Silicon Hegemony sent a squadron of their most advanced fighters. The Crystal Collective deployed their experimental defense platform. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a lesson. The UES Defiant moved through the combined enemy forces like they were standing still. Its weapons adapted to every defense system. Its shields grew stronger under fire. Its hull repaired itself faster than the alien weapons could damage it. In less than 10 minutes, all 3 galactic forces were disabled, their crews unharmed, but their ships completely helpless. How is this possible? Feltar demanded. 10 years of necessity, G1 replied. You forced us to innovate or die. We chose innovation. In the research section of Epsilon Crossing, Dr. Zhong Haiwan presented the galaxy's scientists with humanity's latest discoveries. Medical technology that could heal injuries in hours instead of months. Energy systems that produced power from quantum fluctuations. Transportation networks that could move ships across the galaxy in days instead of years. These advances would have taken us centuries to develop, admitted Chief Scientist Kolaran of the Kavani Trade Federation. How did you achieve them so quickly? Isolation forced us to stop depending on galactic specialization, Haiwan explained. While your species focused on narrow fields of expertise, humans learned to combine all knowledge into unified solutions. She gestured to a display showing human technological development over the past decade. You thought specialization made you superior. It actually made you limited. Humans remained generalists, which allowed us to integrate everything we learned. The alien scientists stared at the data in amazement and growing fear. Humanity hadn't just matched galactic technology. They had transcended it by refusing to be bound by the limitations that held back specialized species. Back in the main conference hall, the debate over humanity's demands continued. But the tone had changed completely. The aliens were no longer discussing whether to allow humanity back into galactic society. They were negotiating the terms of their own continued relevance. Your species was isolated to teach you humility, Veltar said, making one final attempt to maintain some authority. Instead, you have become more arrogant than ever. Director Ojiwan smiled, and there was no warmth in the expression. You abandoned us to break our spirit. Instead, you forged it into something unbreakable. You cut us off to make us dependent. Instead, you made us self-sufficient. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Veltar's face. We return not as your former subjects, but as your superiors. The galaxy spent 10 years proving it cannot function without humanity. Now you'll discover what humanity can accomplish without the galaxy. The conference hall fell silent. Every alien delegate understood that the balance of power had shifted completely. The species they had dismissed as too primitive to join their peaceful alliance had returned as the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity's return was not a homecoming. It was a conquest. The galaxy's response to humanity's return split exactly as President Lim Si-jin had predicted. 6 of the 12 council species immediately accepted humanity's terms, led by the desperate Kavani Trade Federation and the war-torn Zenthari Empire. The other 6, led by the proud Silicon Hegemony, chose Defiance one final time. General Kim Dong-jin stood in the command center of the UES Sovereign, humanity's newest flagship, watching as the rebel coalition's fleets gathered in the Rigel system. Over 300 vessels from 6 different species had come together in the largest military alliance the galaxy had ever seen. Their combined firepower is impressive, observed his tactical officer, Commander Park Soo-young. On paper, Dongjin agreed, but they're still thinking like separate species. Watch how they position themselves. The coalition fleet spread across space in neat formations, each species maintaining their traditional fighting styles. The Silicon hegemony's geometric patterns, the Tauri Republic's defensive clusters, the Vorthon Empire's aggressive spearheads. They fought as allies, not as one force. Signal the fleet, Dongjin ordered. Begin Operation Unity. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of what humanity had learned during 10 years of forced cooperation. The human fleet moved as a single organism, each ship anticipating the other's actions through their quantum network connection. Where the coalition expected humanity to match their numbers, they found something far more dangerous. 50 human vessels moved against 300 alien ships and made it look effortless. The UES Phoenix, under Captain Yoon Haemin's command, disabled an entire squadron of Silicon hegemony fighters without firing a shot. Her ship's adaptive shields simply absorbed their energy weapons and redirected the power back at them, overloading their systems. The UES Thunder, commanded by Captain Lee Jin-woo, faced off against a Vorthon heavy cruiser 3 times its size. The alien vessel's massive guns fired continuously, but the human ship's hull adapted to each attack, becoming stronger with every hit. Within minutes, the Thunder's return fire had crippled the giant cruiser. Across the battlefield, the same pattern repeated. Human technology didn't just outperform the coalition forces, it learned from them, adapted to them, and turned their own strengths against them. How is this possible? Demanded Admiral Kithara of the Vorthon Empire, her flagship listing helplessly after its weapon systems had been systematically dismantled. The answer came from General Kim Dong-jin himself, his image appearing on every coalition ship's communication screen. You taught us that we could only depend on ourselves, he said calmly. So we learned to work as one species with one purpose, sharing all knowledge and resources. You remained divided by your individual specializations and pride. This is impossible, protested Fleet Commander Zexitani of the Silicon hegemony. No species can advance this quickly. No single species, Dongjin corrected. But humanity learned to combine all our knowledge, all our skills, all our innovations into unified solutions. While you fought separate wars with separate technologies, we built a civilization that works as one. The coalition's defeat was complete within 6 hours. Not a single human ship was seriously damaged. Not a single alien crew member was killed. Humanity had proven their superiority without the senseless destruction that had defined galactic warfare for centuries. President Lim Si-jin chose to address the galaxy from the bridge of the UES Ascension. With the disabled coalition fleet visible through the viewports behind her, her words would be remembered as the moment galactic civilization fundamentally changed. 10 years ago you abandoned us to teach us humility, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of known space. You isolated us to break our spirit. You cut us off to force us to abandon our nature. She paused, letting her words sink in across a galaxy that was finally beginning to understand what they had created. Instead, you taught us that we could only depend on ourselves. You showed us that the galaxy's friendship was conditional and temporary. You proved that when things became difficult, you would sacrifice others to preserve your own comfort. The camera pulled back to show the vast human fleet, every ship a testament to what isolation had forged. We return not as your former subjects, but as your teachers. You will learn what we learned. You will adapt as we adapted. You will unite as we united, or you will fall behind as we surpass you. The age of galactic specialization is over. The age of human leadership has begun. In the months that followed, the transformation of galactic society proceeded with stunning speed. Dr. Kang Mina, now Director of Galactic Research Coordination, established new protocols that forced different species to share knowledge instead of hoarding their expertise. The Zenthari energy weapons specialists found themselves working alongside Crystal Collective mineral processors and Silicon hegemony computer engineers. The results were breakthroughs that none of them could have achieved alone. Specialization made you weak, Mina explained to the gathered alien scientists. You became so focused on your narrow fields that you forgot how to innovate beyond them. Humanity remained generalists, which allowed us to see connections you missed. The new research centers, modeled on human facilities, produced advances in months that would have taken the old galactic system decades to achieve. Admiral Kang Dae-ho, Mina's brother, commanded the new galactic peacekeeping force. His ships patrolled trade routes that had been plagued by piracy for years. His forces mediated conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve. His mere presence brought stability to regions that had known only chaos. "We will not make your mistakes," he announced to the galaxy's military leaders. "No species will ever again face the isolation that humanity endured. No civilization will be abandoned for the convenience of others." The peacekeeping force was different from anything the galaxy had seen. Instead of imposing solutions through superior firepower, they offered alternatives. Instead of threatening punishment, they provided better options. When the Tauri Republic and the Myrtal Confederation resumed their border dispute, human mediators didn't just stop the fighting. They introduced new mining technologies that made the disputed territory valuable to both sides, turning conflict into cooperation. When the Outer Rim colonies faced raider attacks, human forces didn't just drive off the pirates. They offered the raiders employment in the expanding galactic infrastructure, turning enemies into allies. Trade networks that had collapsed during humanity's absence were rebuilt around human coordination centers. Economic systems that had stagnated began producing wealth at levels not seen in centuries. Scientific research that had been limited by species barriers began making discoveries that seemed impossible. The galaxy was becoming something new, not the loose alliance of specialized species it had been, but a unified civilization guided by human principles of adaptation, cooperation, and shared strength. In her private office on Earth, President Lim Si-jin looked out at a world that had been transformed by 10 years of isolation. Cities rebuilt with technology that surpassed anything the galaxy possessed. People who carried themselves with the confidence of a species that had proven it could overcome any challenge. "Was it worth it?" asked her advisor, Foreign Minister Park Jun-hyung. Lim considered the question. 10 years of isolation had cost humanity in ways that could never be fully calculated, but those same 10 years had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. "The galaxy turned its back on us when we needed them most," she said finally. "They forced us to discover what we could become without their help. Now they've learned that they cannot survive without ours." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars that humanity now helped guide. "They wanted to teach us humility. Instead, they taught us that we were capable of anything. They wanted to break our spirit. Instead, they forged it into something unbreakable. The galaxy had turned its back on humanity, expecting them to fade into irrelevance or collapse entirely. Instead, humanity had stood their ground, grown stronger, and returned to lead the civilization that had abandoned them. The new order was not built on conquest or domination, but on the simple truth that some species grow strongest when forced to face their greatest challenges alone. Humanity had proven that isolation could forge strength, abandonment could build character, and the species willing to stand alone could ultimately unite a galaxy. The galaxy had made its choice 10 years ago. Now it would live with the consequences, as humanity guided them toward a future none of them could have imagined.